Science Chapter 8 Friction. Friction. You might have seen a driver of a car or a truck slowing down the vehicle at the traffic signal. You too slow down your bicycle whenever needed by applying brakes. Have you ever thought why a vehicle slows down when brakes are applied? Force of friction. Any object moving over the surface of another object slows down when no external force is applied on it. If you gently push a book on a table, you observe that it stops after moving for some distance. Repeat this by pushing the book from the opposite direction. Can we say that a force must be acting on the book opposing its motion? This force is called force of friction. You saw that if you apply the force along the left, friction acts along the right. If you apply the force along the right, the friction acts along the left direction. In both cases, the force opposes the motion of the book. The force of friction always opposes the applied force. The force of friction acts between the surface of the book and the surface of the table. Factors affecting friction. Friction is caused by the irregularities on the two surfaces in contact. Even those surfaces which appear very smooth have a large number of minute irregularities on them. Irregularities on the two surfaces lock into one another. When we attempt to move any surface, we have to apply force to overcome interlocking. On rough surfaces, there are larger number of irregularities. So the force of friction is greater if a rough surface is involved. We see the friction is caused by the interlocking of irregularities in the two surfaces. It is obvious that the force of friction will increase if the two surfaces are pressed harder. You experience it by dragging a mat when nobody is sitting on it and when a person is sitting on it. Types of friction. Recall you moved a heavy object from one place to another. What is easier? To move the box from rest or to move it when it is already in motion? The force required to overcome friction at the instant an object starts moving from rest is a measure of static friction. The force required to keeping the object moving with the same speed is a measure of sliding friction. Sliding friction is slightly smarter than the static friction and you find it somehow easier to move the box already in motion than to friction. It is easier to hold a kulhar, earthen pot or a glass tumbler. Suppose the outer surface of the tumbler is greasy or has a thick layer of cooking oil on it. Would it become easier or more difficult to hold it? If an object started moving, it would never stop if there were no friction. Had there been no friction between the tires of the automobiles and the road, they could not be started or stopped or turned to change the direction of motion. You could not fix a nail on a wall or tie a knot without friction. Without friction, no building could be constructed. Friction can also produce heat. Vigorously rub your palms together for a few minutes. How do you feel? When you strike a matchstick against the rough surface, it catches fire. Increase and increasing and reducing friction. Friction is desirable in some situations. Have you ever thought why the sole of your shoe is grooved? It is done to provide the shoe better grip on the floor so that you can move safely. Similarly, threaded tires of car, trucks, and bulldozers provide better grip with the ground. We deliberately increase friction by using brake pads in the brake systems of bikes and automobiles. When you are riding a bicycle, the brake pads do not touch the wheel. But when you press the brake level, these pads arrest the motion of the rim due to friction. The wheels stop moving. You might have seen that kabaddi players rub their hands with soil for a better grip of the opponent. Gymnastics apply some coarse substance on their hands to increase friction for better grip in some situations. Friction is undesirable and we would want to minimize it. Why do you sprinkle fine powder on the carom board? You might have noticed that when a few drops of oil are poured on the hinges of a door, the doors move smoothly. A bicycle and a motor mechanic uses grease between the moving parts of these machines. In all the above cases, we want to reduce friction in order to increase efficiency. When oil, grease, or graphite is applied between the moving part of a machine, a thin layer is formed there and moving surfaces do not directly rub against each other. Interlocking of irregularity is avoided to a great extent. Movement becomes smooth. The substance which reduce friction are called lubricants. In some machines, it may not be advisable to use oil as lubricants. An air cushion between the moving parts is used to reduce frictions. Will reduce friction. You must have seen attached and other pieces of luggage fitted with rollers. Even a child can pull such pieces of luggage. Why is it so? Let us find out. When one body rolls over the surface of another body, the resistance to its motion is called rolling friction. Rolling reduces friction. It is also easier to roll than to slide a body over another. Wheel reduce friction. That is the reason it is convenient to pull luggage fitted with rolls. You can now understand why the wheels is said to be one of the greatest invention of the mankind. Since the rolling friction is smaller than the sliding friction, sliding is placed in most machines by rolling by the use of ball bearings. Common examples are the use of ball bearings between hubs and the axles of ceiling fans and bicycles. Fluid frictions. You know that air is very light and thin, yet it excretes frictional force on objects moving through it. Similarly, water and other liquids excrete force of friction when objects move through them. In science, the common name of gases and liquid is fluid. So we can say that fluid excrete force of friction on objects in motion through them. The frictional force of an object in a fluid depends on its speed with respect to the fluid. The frictional force also depends on the shape of the object and the nature of the fluid. It is obvious that when objects move through fluid, they have to overcome friction acting on them. In this process, they lose energy. Efforts are therefore made to minimize friction, so objects are given special shapes. Birds and fishes have to move about in fluids all the time. Their bodies must have evolved to shape which would make them lose less energy in overcoming friction. Look carefully at the shape of an aeroplane. Do you find any similarity in this shape and that of a bird? In fact, all vehicles are reduce fluid friction. Summary. Friction opposes the relative motion between two surfaces in contact. It acts on both the surfaces. Friction depends on the nature of surface in contact. For a given pair of surfaces, friction depends upon the state of smoothness of those surfaces. Friction depends on how hard the surface press together. Static friction comes into play when we try to move an object at rest. Sliding friction comes into play when an object is sliding over another. Sliding friction is smaller than static friction. Friction is important for many of our activities. Friction can be increased by making a surface rough. The sole of the shoes and the tires of the vehicle are threaded to increase friction. Friction is sometimes undesirable. Friction can be reduced by using lubricants. When one body rolls over another body, rolling friction comes into play. Rolling friction is smaller than sliding friction. In many machines, friction is reduced by using ball bearings. Fluid frictions can be minimized by giving suitable shapes of body moving in fluids. Thank you.